Okay, this is lesson 1.3, and what you're going to be able to do tomorrow in class is understand everyday situations with multiplication and division. So real world situations and being able to distinguish if you're going to multiply or divide and the best way to go about doing that. We're going to look again at 5 different ways. We have equal groups, array, area, comparison, and combinations. So just before we jump into some work together, let me just refresh you again on what those words mean. So when we have equal groups, we might have 2 groups of 8, and when we have 2 groups of 8, then we have a total of 16, or something like, say I have 3 groups of 3 socks. It's going to give me a total of 9 socks. So we can look at it in that multiplication way of 2 times 8 is the same as 16, or 3 groups of 3 is the same as 9. And then also turning that around to say having a total of 16 and dividing it into 2 groups, it's going to give you 8 in each group, or having a total of 9, dividing it into 3 groups is going to give you 3 in each group. Okay? Then we have over here, then we talk about the array. And when we build an array, we're going rows by columns. So kind of putting things out there in a picture format and making that model. So maybe we have something of 2 rows of 6 plants. So we have 2 rows, and then in each row we have 6 plants. Okay, so 2 over here and 6 up top. And then what we would do is we'd count all of those, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So we have a total of 12. And we could say then that 2 times 6 is 12. Looking at that right there. Okay. Or we could maybe know that we have a total of 2 rows and that we have a total of 12, so we could separate those. Total, and then we could get that division of 12 divided by 2, and we could count up how many columns we have. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that's the array method. I'll kind of draw arrows here. This is equal groups. Okay, then we talked about area method, and generally when we use area in multiplication or in division, we're talking about square units. So maybe what is happening in the situation is that you're building something, maybe your house, and you're going to make it 5 feet by 10 feet, and you want to know how many square feet that space is going to be. And so then you would use that model for area equals base times height. So the area then would equal your base of 10 feet times your height of 5 feet. So your square feet then, or your area then, would be 50 square feet. Okay. Some of you, that model was hard, so what we did is we broke it apart and made those squares. Not the best drawing, but then, we went down. So we have a 5 by 10, and then you just went through and counted how many squares fit on the inside, right? And then from area, then we started talking about comparison. And in comparison, we did comparison bars. So maybe I have 10. I'm going to do comparison right here. So maybe I have 10 jelly beans, and my sister has 2 jelly beans. Okay. So how many times more jelly beans do I have than my sister? So my sister's here, I'm right there. So I'm going to say 2 times, I'm going to put a B for jelly beans, is going to give mine, and then that would be 5. Okay. Or we could say 10 divided by 2 is the jelly, or how many times more jelly beans, and then we could say the b equals 5. Wow, we've learned so much. And then the last one that we had was combinations. And we did a couple things. We did diagram trees, or we drew it out and we said something like, I have 2 socks, maybe they're red and blue, and then I have 3 pairs of shoes. You know, maybe those are pink, green, and yellow. And then what we did is we took those 2 socks. So we started with our socks, and we drew them down, and we had red and blue. And then each sock went with the shoe to figure out how many combinations we had. And we were able to see that we had, excuse me here, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 combinations. Okay, we could count it up with our picture, or we could recognize that was a 2 by 3, and so we had 6 total combinations. So quick review there. That's kind of what we talked about the last couple weeks and kind of even going back into 4th grade. So let's do some practice. But tomorrow when you get to school, that's what we're going to work with. I'm going to work with you in small groups, and we're going to talk about making those, you know, reading story situations and figuring out what the best way to solve them is. So let's go through a couple together. So on this page, we're going to talk about the equal groups. So right up here, equal groups, array, and area. So this is the first one here. We have Amy has 5 cousins. She's making 2 puppets for each cousin. How many puppets will Amy need to make? Okay, so each of her 5 cousins are going to get 2 puppets. So right here we have 5 groups of 2. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So that gives us a total of 10 puppets. Okay, so she'll need to make 10 puppets. They have done that equal groups model for you. Okay, Amy made 10 puppets, so we're going to start with the 10. 10 puppets to divide among her 5 cousins. So then you would extend that down 5, and how many would each get? Okay, so we're going to start with that 10. We're going to share it or divide it amongst 5 of our cousin to get how many each, or how many puppets each cousin gets. Okay, so 10 divided by 5. They each should get 2 puppets. Okay. If you were not able to use this model, pardon the interruption there, but if you were not able to use this diagram, you certainly could start with the 10, and you could say, here's, you know, cousin 1, cousin 2, 3, 4, 5, and start just divvying out those puppets. 1 for you, 1 for you. Then we got 3, 4, 5. Can I give everybody another one? Yes. 1, 2, 4, 5. Okay, so you've given everybody, and then what you're going to look at is one cousin. How many did you give them? Well, you gave them 2. So that's another way that we do equal groups, and that is okay if that's where your comfort zone is with doing equal groups. Amy made 10 puppets for her cousin. Each cousin will get 2 puppets. How many cousins does Amy have? Okay, so you might be able to say, well, okay, I recognize that I have 10 puppets total. Okay, that's the amount that I'm starting with, and I'm going to start spreading those out, 2 puppets each. So I'm going to divide it into 2, and that's going to give me the amount of cousins that I have. Or you could go into that drawing and say, I know I have 10 puppets, so let's start. Let's see, I can give a group of 2, then another group of 2 is 4, another, so I have 1 group, 2 groups, another group of 2, that's 6, another group is 8, another group, that gives me to 10, and that's 5 groups. Okay, so it's going to give me C equals 5 cousins. So that's another way of doing equal grouping for all those different situations. Okay, let's talk about area and array, because these get so confused sometimes about which one you're supposed to use, and I totally get why that can be confusing. Remember, an array is just an arranged rows and columns, but when you're talking about area, you're talking about square units covering a certain amount of space. Okay, so let's look at some of these situations here. A garden has 2 rows and 5 columns of bean plants. So right away, they're giving us rows and columns, so that should be triggering us to know, I could maybe make an array for this. How many plants are there in all? Okay, so right over here they've done the drawing for you. They have 2 rows, so row 1, row 2, and there's 5 columns going this way. How many plants are in all? Certainly, if your comfort is, you could start counting those, or maybe you recognize right away that that's 2 times 5, and that's going to give you a total of 10. Okay. The garden is 4 yards and 5 yards, I'm sorry, the garden is 2 yards wide, and 5 yards long. What is its area? So right away it's telling us that we're looking for area, but when we have those measurements of yards, and then we also have wide and long, we can think of that base times height, okay, or width times length is another way that formula works too. And we're looking for how many square yards we can fit into the center. So we have 2 this way and 5 this way. We've made the squares inside how many squares? We should have 10 squares. So we've taken 2 times 5, and that's going to give us the area, and then that area then will be 10, and you put yards, and then you put the little 2 to represent the squared yards, right? A garden has a total of 10 bean plants in 2 rows. How many columns does it have? Okay, so we have our total plants, and we know that they're in 2 equal rows. So now we need to know how many columns there are. So it gave us our total. Generally, when you have that larger amount that you know you're going to start splitting up, that's going to trigger you to go, I'm going to divide. So 10 bean plants into 2 equal rows is going to give you how many columns. And I'm using C for columns. So I wouldn't know that that's 5 is there, and I have my 10. I put them into 2 equal rows, and then I would start counting columns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so C equals 5. This one, this says the area of the garden is 10 square yards. It is 2 yards wide. How long is it? Okay, so we have our total area of 10. We know that one side, so we have right here we have our 10. We know that it is 2 yards wide, so times that length, okay, or times that height is going to help us. So you could certainly do it this way and just fill in your formula. 2 times the height is going to give you 10. Or you could say 10 divided by 2 is going to give you the length. Right? Just use an L there because that was starting to look like a 1. But your length then is going to equal 5. Sometimes 5th graders really try to, put it into this formula instead of putting it into the division because they know the formula for area to find that unknown. Alrighty. Just going to look at time here. All right, I'm going to wrap it up quick. Let's go to the next page. I hate to have you guys sitting here long and listening to me. So comparisons, that's what we spent so much time today talking about when you have comparison bars. All right, let's quickly look at that. And we'll spend more time going over this in class tomorrow too, just to refresh your memory. But Bill has 2 apples. Kim has 5 times as many apples as Bill. How many apples does Kim have? Okay, so we're using those comparison bars. Bill has 2 and Kim has 5 times as many apples as Bill. So we can make 5 groups here in those comparison bars of 2, which some of you are really comfortable with. Or we could start with, and we could just say 2, and we know that one is larger, and this one is 2 times 5, and that's going to give you 10. Okay. And then Kim has 10 apples. Bill has 1/5 as many apples as Kim. How many apples does Bill have? We could say 1/5 times 10, and then we could figure out that is bringing us to do. And I'm going to have to get to our time here set because I'm almost to 15 minutes, and I'm going to have to stop right here. So the rest of combinations we'll talk about tomorrow. Thank you for watching the video.